Hello and welcome back to the English Hustle Podcast. I'm Alex, your host.
And I'm Maria. We're so excited to have you with us today.
Today, we're diving into a topic that's incredibly relevant for all of us: managing stress effectively.
Absolutely, Alex. Stress is something that everyone deals with, whether you're a student, working professional, or even just trying to juggle daily life. It's so important to understand how to manage it so it doesn't take over your life.
That's right. And stress isn't always a bad thing. It can motivate us to get things done. But too much stress, especially when we don't know how to handle it, can lead to burnout and affect our mental and physical health.
So, in today's episode, we're going to talk about what stress is, what causes it, and most importantly, how we can manage it effectively. We'll also be sharing some personal experiences and tips that have worked for us.
And for those of you learning English, this episode is also a great opportunity to pick up some new vocabulary related to stress management. So, let's get started. Warm-up chat. What is stress? So, Maria, let's kick things off by talking about stress. It's a word we hear all the time, but what does it really mean to you?
Good question, Alex. For me, stress is that feeling of being overwhelmed, like there's just too much on my plate. It's like when you have a million things to do and not enough time or energy to do them all.
I can totally relate to that. I think of stress as that tension or pressure we feel when we're trying to meet expectations, whether it's from work, family, or even ourselves.
Yeah, and it's not just mental, right? Stress can affect you physically too. I remember when I was studying for my finals in college, I was so stressed out that I actually got sick. My body just couldn't handle the pressure.
I've had a similar experience. I used to work in a really fast-paced job and I was constantly stressed. I would get headaches, my back would hurt, and I just felt exhausted all the time. It was like my body was trying to tell me to slow down, but I didn't listen.
That's so common. And it's interesting because stress isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes a little bit of stress can actually help us perform better, like when you have a deadline, and that pressure pushes you to focus and get the job done.
Exactly. It's all about balance, though. Too much stress, and it can start to take a toll on your health and well-being, but just the right amount can keep you motivated and productive.
And the tricky part is that stress looks different for everyone. What stresses one person out might not even faze someone else. It really depends on how you perceive a situation.
Right? It's very individual. And that's why it's so important to recognize when you're feeling stressed and understand what's causing it. Once you identify your stressors, you can start figuring out how to manage them.
Exactly. And later in the episode, we'll dive into some practical tips for managing stress. But before we get there, let's talk a bit more about what causes stress in the first place. Because knowing what triggers your stress is the first step in dealing with it.
Good idea. And to everyone listening, as we go through this, think about what stress means to you. How do you know when you're stressed, and what tends to trigger that stress? We'll be asking you to reflect on that later. Main topic: discussion. Causes of stress. All right, so now that we've talked about what stress is, let's dig into what actually causes it. Maria, what do you think are some of the most common causes of stress?
Well, one of the biggest sources of stress for many people is work. Whether it's dealing with tight deadlines, managing difficult co-workers, or just having too much on your plate, work can be a major stressor.
Absolutely. I think most of us have felt that pressure at work at some point. For me, one of the most stressful situations was when I had multiple projects due at the same time. It felt like I was constantly racing against the clock and it was hard to keep up.
I've been there too. And it's not just the workload. Sometimes it's the environment. If you're working in a place where there's a lot of noise or constant interruptions, that can really add to your stress levels.
Definitely. And then there's also the stress that comes from feeling like you're not in control. For example, if you're waiting on someone else to finish their part of a project, or if you're worried about job security, that uncertainty can be really stressful.
Another big one is financial stress. Worrying about money, whether it's paying bills, managing debt, or saving for the future, can create a lot of anxiety.
Yes, financial stress is a huge factor. It's one of those things that can affect every part of your life, from your relationships to your health. I remember a time when I was between jobs, and I was so stressed about making ends meet. It felt like a cloud hanging over me all the time.
That's so true. And speaking of relationships, those can be another major cause of stress. Whether it's dealing with conflicts in your personal life, trying to support a friend who's going through a tough time, or managing family responsibilities, relationships can be both a source of joy and stress.
Yes, relationships are definitely a double-edged sword. I think we've all experienced stress from arguments or misunderstandings with loved ones. It's hard because these are people you care about, so it feels even more intense when things aren't going well.
And let's not forget about health-related stress. Whether it's dealing with a chronic illness, recovering from an injury, or even just worrying about your health, this can be incredibly stressful.
Absolutely. Health is such a fundamental part of our well-being, and when something's wrong, it affects everything. Even worrying about a potential health issue can be stressful, like waiting for test results, for example. That's a stressful experience many people can relate to.
Then there's the stress that comes from life changes, even positive ones. Things like moving to a new city, starting a new job, or getting married can be exciting, but they also bring a lot of stress because they involve big adjustments.
Exactly. Even when we're excited about these changes, they still require us to adapt, which can be stressful. I remember when I moved to a new city for work. I was excited about the opportunity, but also stressed about finding a place to live, making new friends, and adjusting to a new environment.
And let's not forget about the stress that comes from information overload. With social media and 24/7 news, we're constantly bombarded with information, which can be overwhelming.
Yes, we're living in a time where it's easy to feel overwhelmed by all the information and opinions coming at us from every direction. It's like we never get a break from it.
So, as you can see, there are many different causes of stress, and what stresses one person out might not affect someone else in the same way. The important thing is to recognize what your stresses are so you can start finding ways to manage them.
That's right, Maria. Understanding the root causes of your stress is the first step toward managing it effectively. And now that we've covered some of the most common causes, we'll move on to sharing some practical tips and techniques for dealing with stress in our next segment. Story time. A personal, stressful experience. Now let's switch gears a bit and share some personal stories about stressful situations we've faced. Maria, do you want to go first?
Sure. So, one of the most stressful experiences I had was during my final year of university. I had this huge research paper due, and I was also working part-time to support myself. It felt like I was constantly running out of time. I'd spend all day in classes, then rush to work, and by the time I got home, I was too exhausted to focus on my paper.
That sounds intense. How did you manage all of that?
Honestly, at first, I didn't manage it well. I was so stressed that I started losing sleep, which made it even harder to concentrate. I was getting more and more anxious about the deadline. But then I realized I needed to break the cycle. I started by making a detailed schedule, breaking the paper into smaller tasks that I could handle each day. I also made sure to set aside some time for myself, even if it was just 30 minutes to relax with a book or take a walk. It wasn't easy, but eventually I was able to get the paper done and still keep my sanity.
That's a great example of how organizing your time and taking care of yourself can make a big difference. It's easy to get overwhelmed, but having a plan really helps.
Definitely. What about you, Alex? What's one of the most stressful situations you've been in?
For me, one of the most stressful experiences was when I was starting my first job out of college. I was excited, but also really nervous because I wanted to make a good impression. I had a lot of responsibilities and was working long hours to prove myself. One day, I was given a project with a tight deadline, and I was already swamped with other tasks. I started to panic, thinking there was no way I could get everything done on time.
That sounds tough. How did you handle it?
Well, initially, I tried to just power through it by working even longer hours, but that only made me more stressed and tired. Then, I decided to talk to my manager. I explained the situation and asked for advice on how to prioritize my tasks. My manager helped me break down the project into more manageable steps and even assigned some of my other tasks to a colleague. That conversation really took a load off my shoulders, and I was able to focus better and meet the deadline.
That's a great point. Sometimes just asking for help can make a huge difference. It's easy to think you have to handle everything on your own, but reaching out to others can really reduce stress.
Exactly. It's important to remember that we don't have to do everything by ourselves. Whether it's asking for help, managing our time better, or just taking a break, there are ways to manage stress before it overwhelms us.
Right. And I hope our stories can help our listeners realize that it's okay to feel stressed sometimes, but there are ways to handle it effectively.
Tips and techniques. Managing stress. All right. Now that we've shared some personal stories, let's get into the heart of today's episode. Practical tips and techniques for managing stress. We all know stress is a part of life, but there are definitely ways to keep it under control. Maria, what's the first tip you'd recommend?
One of the best ways to manage stress is through regular exercise. I know it sounds simple, but it really works. When you exercise, your body releases endorphins, which are like natural mood lifters. Plus, it gives you a break from whatever is stressing you out. Even just a 30-minute walk can make a big difference.
I completely agree. I've noticed that when I'm feeling overwhelmed, going for a run or even just stretching helps me clear my mind. It doesn't have to be intense exercise. Even light activity like yoga can be really effective. It helps to focus on your breathing and be in the moment, which leads us to our next tip: meditation.
Yes, meditation is another powerful tool. It's all about mindfulness, paying attention to the present moment without judgment. When you meditate, you're training your mind to stay calm and focused even in stressful situations. It can be as simple as sitting quietly for a few minutes and focusing on your breath.
I've found that meditation is great for reducing anxiety. There are some really good apps out there that can guide you through meditation sessions, which is perfect for beginners. You don't need to be an expert to start meditating. Just a few minutes a day can help you feel more centered and less stressed.
Another important technique is time management. We touched on this earlier, but it's worth repeating. Stress often comes from feeling like you don't have enough time to get everything done. Creating a schedule and prioritizing your tasks can really help. Make a to-do list, but be realistic about what you can accomplish in a day.
Exactly. And don't forget to include breaks in your schedule. It's easy to think you need to keep working non-stop, but taking regular breaks can actually make you more productive. Even a 5-minute break to stand up, stretch, or get some fresh air can do wonders for your stress levels.
Speaking of breaks, another tip is to disconnect from technology every once in a while. We're constantly plugged in, checking emails, scrolling through social media, or watching the news. It can be overwhelming. Taking a digital detox, even if it's just for an hour a day, can help you recharge and reduce stress.
That's such a good point. We don't realize how much constant connectivity can add to our stress. I like to set aside some time each day where I turn off my phone and just focus on something I enjoy, like reading a book or going for a walk.
And speaking of enjoying things, finding a hobby or activity you love is another great way to manage stress, whether it's painting, cooking, gardening, or even just watching your favorite TV show. Doing something you enjoy helps take your mind off your worries and brings some joy into your day.
Yes, hobbies are such a great outlet. When you're engaged in something you love, it's like giving your brain a mini vacation. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated. Even simple activities like knitting or playing a musical instrument can be really relaxing.
And finally, don't forget the power of talking to someone. Whether it's a friend, family member, or therapist, sometimes just sharing what you're going through can make a huge difference. It's important to remember that you're not alone and that it's okay to ask for help when you need it.
Absolutely. Talking things out can help you gain perspective and feel supported. Sometimes just hearing someone say, "I understand," can make a world of difference. So if you're feeling stressed, don't hesitate to reach out to someone you trust.
So to recap, we've talked about exercise, meditation, time management, taking breaks, disconnecting from technology, enjoying hobbies, and talking to someone. These are all great ways to manage stress and improve your overall well-being.
We hope you find these tips helpful. Remember, managing stress is a continuous process, and it's all about finding what works best for you. Vocabulary. Corner. Stress-related terms. Now that we've covered some tips and techniques for managing stress, let's shift gears and dive into our vocabulary corner. Today, we're going to introduce and explain some key terms related to stress management. These words and phrases are not only useful for understanding today's topic, but they're also great for expanding your English vocabulary.
Exactly. Learning these terms will help you talk about stress more clearly and confidently. So let's get started. Alex, what's the first term?
The first term is burnout. Burnout is a state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. It often happens when you feel overwhelmed and unable to meet constant demands. Maria, how would you use this word in a sentence?
Sure. Here's an example. After working long hours for several months without a break, she experienced burnout and had to take time off to recover. Burnout is something many people face, especially in demanding jobs, so it's important to recognize the signs early.
Great example. Another key term is coping mechanisms. These are strategies or behaviors that people use to manage stress and difficult emotions. For instance, some people might use exercise or meditation as coping mechanisms.
Right. An example sentence could be, he uses deep breathing exercises as a coping mechanism when he feels stressed at work. Everyone has different coping mechanisms, and finding what works best for you is key to managing stress effectively.
The next term is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of being fully present and engaged in the current moment, without judgment. It's a great way to reduce stress by focusing on the here and now instead of worrying about the past or future.
Here's how you could use it. She practices mindfulness by focusing on her breath and letting go of distracting thoughts. Mindfulness is a powerful tool for managing stress and improving overall well-being.
Another important term is stressors. Stressors are events or conditions that cause stress. These can be anything from work deadlines to relationship problems.
Exactly. Here's an example. Identifying your stressors is the first step in learning how to manage them effectively. Knowing what triggers your stress can help you take control and find ways to reduce its impact.
Let's also talk about resilience. Resilience is the ability to recover quickly from difficulties or setbacks. When we talk about managing stress, building resilience is important because it helps you bounce back from challenges.
Right. You might say, developing resilience allows you to handle stress better and maintain a positive outlook even during tough times. Resilience doesn't mean you won't feel stressed, but it does mean you'll be better equipped to deal with it.
Another useful term is self-care. Self-care refers to activities and practices that we do to take care of our physical, mental, and emotional health. It's crucial for managing stress.
Absolutely. Here's an example. She makes self-care a priority by setting aside time each day for activities she enjoys. Self-care isn't selfish. It's necessary for maintaining balance and reducing stress.
And one more term to add is time management. We've already talked about this, but it's worth mentioning again. Time management is the process of organizing and planning how to divide your time between specific activities. Good time management helps you get more done in less time and with less stress.
Exactly. An example sentence could be, improving her time management skills helped her reduce stress and feel more in control of her workload. Time management is a skill that can make a big difference in how stressed you feel.
So, to recap, today's vocabulary includes burnout, coping mechanisms, mindfulness, stressors, resilience, self-care, and time management. These terms are all related to stress and are useful for discussing how to manage it effectively.
We hope these words help you better understand and talk about stress management. Try using them in your own conversations and see how they can help you communicate more effectively in English.
Role play. Dealing with stressful situations. To wrap up our episode today, let's do a quick role play to demonstrate how to handle a stressful situation effectively. We'll act out a scenario involving a tight deadline at work. Maria, are you ready?
Absolutely, Alex. Let's set the scene. Imagine we're working together on a project with a deadline that's just a few hours away. We're feeling overwhelmed because we still have a lot to finish.
Great. I'll play the role of Alex, the project manager, and you'll be Maria, the team member. Ready? Let's start.
Hey, Alex, I'm really stressed about this project. We're running out of time, and there's still so much to do. I don't know how we're going to finish everything on time.
I understand, Maria. It's definitely a tight deadline. Let's take a step back and assess the situation. First, let's make a quick list of what needs to be done and prioritize the most critical tasks.
Okay, that sounds good. So, we need to finish the report, prepare the presentation slides, and review the data. What should we tackle first?
Let's focus on the report first, since that's the core of our project. We can divide the work into smaller sections and each take a part. I'll handle the introduction and analysis sections, and you can work on the conclusion and recommendations.
That makes sense. And what about the presentation slides?
Once we have the report sections done, we can work on the slides together. We'll use the key points from the report to create a summary for the presentation. I'll draft the main points while you refine the visuals.
Sounds like a plan. I feel better having a clear plan and knowing what each of us is responsible for.
Me too. Remember to take short breaks if you start feeling overwhelmed. A few minutes to step away and recharge can make a big difference. Also, if you need any help with your part, don't hesitate to ask.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate the support. I'll get started on my tasks and check in with you in an hour.
Perfect. We've got this. Let's stay focused and tackle these tasks one step at a time.
Absolutely. Thanks for the encouragement.
No problem. We're a team, and we'll get through this together. A quick quiz. Stress management techniques. All right, listeners, it's time for a quick quiz to test your knowledge on stress management techniques. We'll go through a few questions based on what we've discussed today. Ready, Maria?
I'm ready, Alex. Let's see how well our listeners remember the tips we've shared.
Great. Here's the first question. What is one benefit of regular exercise when it comes to managing stress?
Think about how exercise can impact your mood and stress levels. Is it A, it increases stress? B, it releases endorphins that help improve mood? Or C, it makes you more tired?
The correct answer is B. It releases endorphins that help improve mood. Exercise is a fantastic way to boost your mood and reduce stress.
Next question. Which technique involves focusing on the present moment without judgment?
Is it A, time management, B, mindfulness, or C, self-care?
The answer is B, mindfulness. Practicing mindfulness helps you stay calm and focused, which is great for managing stress.
Here's a practical question. What is a good way to manage stress caused by a heavy workload?
Is it A, ignoring the tasks and hoping they go away? B, breaking tasks into smaller steps and prioritizing? Or C, taking on more tasks to stay busy?
The correct answer is B, breaking tasks into smaller steps and prioritizing. This approach helps you handle tasks more effectively and reduces stress.
Now let's think about self-care. What is one example of self-care that can help manage stress?
Is it A, working overtime, B, engaging in a favorite hobby, or C, avoiding breaks?
The correct answer is B, engaging in a favorite hobby. Taking time for activities you enjoy is a key part of self-care.
Last question. How can talking to someone help manage stress?
Is it A, it can make you feel more isolated, B, it helps gain perspective and feel supported, or C, it adds to your stress?
The answer is B. It helps gain perspective and feel supported. Sharing your feelings with someone you trust can be very relieving and helpful.
Great job, everyone. Reflect on these questions and think about how you can apply these techniques in your daily life. Remember, managing stress is all about finding what works best for you.
Thanks for participating in the quiz. We hope it's helped you think more about the stress management strategies we discussed today.
Absolutely. Take these tips and techniques and try them out. With practice, you'll find what works best for you in handling stress.
Listener questions. Now it's time to answer some of the questions we've received from our listeners. We've got a few great ones related to managing stress, so let's dive in. Maria, are you ready?
I'm ready, Alex. Let's see what our listeners want to know.
First up, we have a question from Sarah. She asks, I've been feeling overwhelmed at work, but I find it hard to take breaks. How can I make sure I'm taking effective breaks without falling behind?
Great question, Sarah. Taking effective breaks is important for reducing stress and maintaining productivity. One way to do this is by using the Pomodoro technique. This involves working for 25 minutes, then taking a 5-minute break. After 4 of these cycles, take a longer break. This method helps ensure you're taking regular breaks without losing track of your tasks.
That's a great tip. Breaks can really help refresh your mind and boost productivity. Our next question is from James. He asks, what are some quick mindfulness exercises I can do at work if I'm feeling stressed?
Mindfulness exercises can be very effective in managing stress. One quick exercise you can try is the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. Here's how it works. Take a moment to notice and identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This helps ground you in the present moment and can reduce stress quickly.
That sounds very practical. Our next question is from Linda. She says, I often feel stressed at home due to family responsibilities. How can I better manage stress when I'm dealing with multiple demands at home?
Managing stress at home can be challenging. One effective approach is to use time blocking. Allocate specific times for different responsibilities and stick to this schedule as closely as possible. Also, don't hesitate to communicate with your family about how you're feeling and ask for support or share responsibilities. Remember, it's important to balance personal time with family duties.
Very useful advice. Our next question is from Mark, who asks, how can I stay motivated to exercise regularly, even when I'm feeling stressed and unmotivated?
Staying motivated can be tough, especially when you're stressed. One strategy is to set small, achievable goals and focus on the immediate benefits of exercise, like feeling more energized and less stressed after a workout. Another tip is to find an exercise buddy or join a class. Having social support can make it easier to stick to your routine.
Good advice. And finally, we have a question from Emma. She asks, What's the best way to introduce mindfulness into my daily routine if I'm new to it?
A great way to start with mindfulness is to set aside a few minutes each day for practice. Begin with short sessions like 5-10 minutes and use guided mindfulness apps or videos if needed. Consistency is key, so try to incorporate mindfulness into your routine at the same time each day, such as in the morning or before bed.
Fantastic tips, Maria. Thanks to everyone who sent in questions. We hope these answers help you manage your stress better.
Absolutely. If you have more questions or need further clarification, feel free to reach out. We're here to support you in your stress management journey.
Wrap up and recap. That's a wrap for today's episode on managing stress effectively. Let's quickly summarize the key points we covered.
We discussed various stress management techniques, including the benefits of regular exercise, mindfulness practices, effective time management, and the importance of self-care. We also explored terms related to stress like burnout, coping mechanisms, and resilience.
We role-played a stressful situation and demonstrated effective communication and stress management techniques. Plus, we answered some great listener questions, offering practical advice for managing stress in everyday life.
And don't forget, you can use these tips and techniques to better manage your own stress. It's all about finding what works best for you and incorporating these practices into your daily routine.
We're excited to dive into that topic and provide more valuable insights. Thanks for tuning in to the English Hustle podcast. Remember to subscribe and stay tuned for our next episode.
Until then, take care and keep working on managing your stress. See you next time.